video and upload it about student presentations, so you can get an idea of kind of like oh, that's what a good like an A presentation looks like. Yeah, what's up, Noah?
Two things. One's a comment, one's a question. The question is, can we copy? I don't want to say copy and paste, and obviously we won't do it to the whole thing, but can we take sections of our presentation and put it into the OneNotes if we simplify it and make it short?
For like notes that you're adding to the class?
If they're small and succinct.
Yeah, no,
Yeah, and obviously
absolutely. I mean, absolutely. And that's kind of like
easy. Yeah.
I think that'll be actually really where we'll be able to we'll fill out the notes in our timeline a little bit more with all kinds of your like special interests now, because from this point on, as you're reading, you'll also be kind of going off in all these other corners of the internet and YouTube video, when it just kind of starts auto playing stuff on one theme and you're like, okay, I'm in deep now. Like, you'll bring those things back and add them where they're appropriate. And so, yeah, those are like the perfect things for everybody to add. Like, if everybody's doing that, we're going to be on such diverse topics, from war to, I don't know,
Yeah,
image, cinema.
sure, sure. Yeah, and the comment was on the Treaty of Versailles. I heard that from the military historian Victor Davis Hansen, and
Mm-hmm.
also from a bunch of economists, that it was really like half-assed. Like it wasn't like a properly done treaty, so to speak.
Yeah,
Obviously, like it was. No, because the thing is, like Hansen from the military front, Hansen said that they didn't actually invade Germany, so they didn't like invade, take out the infrastructure,
right.
imprison their leaders, and divide up their country, or even put Germany back into the 1870s, where there are a bunch of like little like self-governing provinces, and they didn't like. No, no. Did you see? So, and yes, they disbanded their military, but they did it like it's like beating up someone
Mm-hmm.
and like breaking their jaw and like in their hand. A year later, they're gonna come back and fight you and be really angry next time they do it. Like you didn't actually like disassemble them, or and that's a kind of a nasty analogy, but you get the point. Like,
Absolutely. And it's kind of
and then
some of
from the
the hypocrisy of like the things Wilson said, right? Like, we're going to have a peace, we'll get peace without victory, I think is the saying. Essentially, like, we're going to end the war, but nobody's going to be a victor. But then, like, they go do this treaty and they're like, let's punch Germany until they, crap themselves, and then let's make them eat it in front of everybody. It was like, geez, man, this is like, you're trying to humiliate them.
And I'm fine. I mean, I don't want to say I'm fine with it, but like I understand that ethos, but they did it in a really bad way. Like they
Right.
should have occupied it. They should have occupied it for like 50 years, like we did the South Korea. They
Yeah.
should divide it up into several countries. No, no, yeah, and also from an economics lens, like Keynes and also a lot of modern economists say that there's no trade. You have no trade, you can't really guarantee. I don't want to say guarantee peace, but like it's less viable because businesses and there's no cultural globalization. There's no you, and if you trade, businesses will want to protect their interests, so they don't want a war.
Mhm.
Yeah, so like I think a smart way to do it is they can have the little gloating and the showboating and how Germany was like the one who caused the war and stuff. They can do all of that, but they need to invade it. They need to occupy it. They need to divide it up into like 6 countries or even more than that, and they need to like occupy it for decades.
Or
You can
if
get
they
like they need to do much more than that.
if they didn't do that, they needed to treat Germany as an equal at a table trying to settle a horrible war that's gone on for 4 years plus, right? Like, it, like you said, they clearly hadn't lost, like they weren't invaded. And that's, it is one of the reasons they're like, we're going to Berlin no matter what. Like, in Hermann Goring, and people were like trying to make secret treaties on the side behind Hitler's back. And nobody was interested at that point. Patton's like,
Yeah,
screw you guys.
yeah, Hansen said that the fact that the Germans didn't actually like brutally lose made a mythology that they could have won the war. That it
Yes.
was the
Yeah.
war. Yeah, that they were weak and like their king was weak and they needed a strong leader.
And if they could have just, if they can get the chance
Yes.
again, they'll prove it right.
Yeah, the redemption thing. And also I've read this with analysts in China how Germany in many ways was going to be the superpower in Europe no matter what. It was bigger and it was more industrial, So I think if they really wanted to win the war, they need to divide up Germany, and they need to like splinter it, and they need to like you get it, like they didn't.
Well, so the mistakes of what happens is what guides people to have that like joint occupation zone, to go into the capital all the way into Berlin, to have like forced economic integrated markets and currencies, to lend money out to these nations. And you see the disparity there between East Berlin and West Berlin as they develop for years after the war. It's like, oh, like one does very well and one is like just a bleak place to live.
Yeah,
And so John, John Maynard Keynes, the like, yeah, at least one of the, he might be the most important economist from the 20th century. And he'll be very influential for like Roosevelt after this. But he remarks of the Treaty of Versailles, says, it's a horrible deal. This is a bad policy. And he goes on to say it doesn't provide for any of these things, and he's listing them. And at the end, it's like, it doesn't provide for any of the rebuilding of Germany, no conditions that would turn her into a good neighbor. So the policy after World War II is a good neighbor policy. Like, we want to build you back up into our trading partner.
Yeah, and the thing is, like, it's like the South, how when you invade and take away slavery, it's not that's you kind of took everything they had from them, even if it was justified. We're not going to just be like, yeah, we're friends now. There's that phrase, you won the war but lost the victory in the South. Yeah. Like, I think with Germany that was really prevalent, and also with how you said that during World War II they were going to invade Berlin no matter what. Hansen said that the reason why, the logic, and you probably read this in the videos I sent you, was that if they had a treaty again or whatever, it would have been like the Punic Wars, where there would have been like a Cold War with each of those three fascist countries, like over the course of 50 years.
Yeah. I like those videos. I think does he have a few videos on Netflix, actually? I thought he had a few things on World War II on Netflix that I had seen. And I can't remember because I've been doing a lot of editing. So if one of you has spotted it, let me know. I want to put one of his videos in the World War I section because I think he's just bang on a lot of this stuff. Like, he just hits the nail on the head. Yeah,
Hansen, he's a slight political pundit. Like, he's writes a lot of political articles, but even his critics say he's a brilliant analyst. Like,
yeah. Hey, what's his name again?
Victor Davis Hansen.
Victor Davis Hansen.
David Hansen. Okay.
I'm looking back to see if I did get one of his videos in here, and I'm not seeing it right so far.
Watch his video.
Would you put a link in the chat for one of his the World War I video you sent me, and I'll just add it into Satori real quick because it's great. It's like, especially in terms of like supplemental lecture and while I'm very creative and we can think about history from lots of different angles. I'm not always the most straightforward on how we approach things. He's like a military historian, so they're usually they're like engineers. They're much clearer and they're kind of.
Oh yeah, he does have some videos on YouTube.
Oh yeah. Oh no, I think he has some on Netflix too, actually.
Netflix? Okay.
Yeah. Like I could be wrong on that.
Oh, let me look it up.
All right. Well,
I got it.
Okay. Oh, great. Here.
Getting you the second one right now.
But does he have some on
I think it's the second
Netflix though? That he was saying.
Well, I think he has some on Masterclass. Let me check.
Ooh.
Oh yeah.
Masterclass.
Yeah, he's good. He's really good. And like, man, World War II, it's such an epic thing. And like both World Wars, they're so huge, and the data on them and everything that it's even in the last few years, we've changed how we think about different events and what we know about different things. And
yeah, if you guys don't, I understand if you guys don't like Trump or anything, but he gives an interesting viewpoint on Trumpian politics because he's like a farmer, and that's one of the reasons why he is interested in war because like he's a classical historian, so he studies like war in Greece, which was like farming and agrarian, and look, so I think like he talks a lot about how jobs are lost in those areas and how like legal immigrants can cause crime. And don't get me wrong, if you disagree with his conclusions, he's brilliant in how he talks about that specific viewpoint. So I know Stepro, you like listen to people talk. You should watch some of his videos on Trump. Even if you think they're wrong, they're really good, insightful.
Oh yeah, I will. I appreciate that stuff. That app that I'm on, that radio or stereo app, I was listening to some people today, and this gal was talking about Carol Baskin and how she's so much better than Joe Exotic because Joe Exotic shot a tiger named Cuddles, which is pretty horrible. But then, like she's like, and Carol Baskin, what if she did kill her husband? He pulled her up at like gunpoint when she was like 18, and like all this stuff, and I'm like. Like I haven't thought about it that way, actually.
I mean, but he's a missing person. He's not found. Like, I just can't agree with that. She's a bad person.
I think she's a bad person.
She's totally bad. He's a missing person. Like, they can't find nothing of him. There's nothing. It's been like how many years? It's been like a couple years now.
And
like
he had
20
money.
Years. He had money.
He had money.
I didn't even know there was so much money in the tiger industry. I'm like, God, Lee, I think I've been going around life doing the wrong damn thing.
You could just get a big duffel bag or some wheel up suitcases and smuggle tiger cubs into hotel rooms for a living. Nothing wrong with that.
Nothing wrong with that.
All right. Well, I added these videos in here. I'm going to switch over to screen share now.
Professor.
Yes.
But who has all his money now? Baskin.
Yeah.
You know it.
Carol Baskin.
That bitch, Carol Baskin!
It's all Carol Baskin's fault.
Yeah.
It is.
She's really behind the Pizzagate conspiracy. Carol Baskin.
That was a side joke. Listen, did you just update your story on this the one that we're covering right now?
Yeah, World War I.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when did you do this?
Over the last week.
Okay, because I already did all my notes, and I'm like, wait, there's a lot more information here.
Yeah, sorry, I'm into the 20s too. I'm like at 1925, okay, so I'm trying to get like at least a half a chapter ahead of everybody as we go forward as I'm updating stuff.
Okay. So you're behind, I was ahead, so we're good. Thank you. Just wanted to know.
Cool.
If I was looking at the right thing.
Right on. So, like, I can mute this, but this is just footage. I mean, like, real footage. And now they have some of this stuff cleaned up, and, like, the way they've digitized and colorized it, it really does bring a lot of this footage just back to, to life and to depth, the way that black and white footage doesn't. We have like a mental disconnect with black and white footage, I think. But people were like exuberant. They were so happy when the war ended because it was horrible. Everybody was happy everywhere. Like people in Germany were happy when the war ended. People like Adolf Hitler weren't. He was very, quite dismayed to find out that Germany had given up. I mean, he buys into the stabbed in the back, we could have won the war myth. All the way. Do you
think there's truth to it? Hansen says that I think Hansen said no, it wasn't true at all. But like, do you think?
The what?
I don't know. I'm sorry. Hansen said that that's a myth. That the Germans lost. It was just a matter of how badly they were gonna, like the reparations they had to pay. Like that was what was being negotiated. But do you think there's any chance they could have won the war? Like if America had not intervened, for example?
Yeah, if America had not intervened, definitely. I think that's totally possible. If America even did intervene and they kept fighting, it was like Germany knew they couldn't win the war. But they had like millions of soldiers still. They're like, well, we can kill a shit ton more people. Like, that's a reality. But like, I don't know. I think there is something to like, once the guns get laid down in the Armistice, it's like, even if all the countries called the war back on, I don't think the troops would have gone. Like, I don't think they could have forced anybody to go back there. Like, really? Nobody would willingly return.
Wait, I have a question. Mm-hmm. I'm like, this is not, I hope not to be like off the subject, but when you brought about the Armenian genocide,
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking, like, have you seen in the news about the Armenian war? What's going on right now,
Yeah.
and how Russia is backing, I think, Armenia, and Turkey is backing Armenian. I don't know how to say that.
Azerbaijan. Yeah.
Yeah.
Azerbaijanian. I don't know. I actually don't
Yeah.
know. I've never said that word
It's like
before.
this can be something that can be really major or not. I just
It totally
like
can.
thinking
And
it.
like, a few years ago when Russia basically moved in and took over the Ukraine, like the UN
Mhm.
didn't do anything. Like, and you
Mhm.
guys, in the same way, France and Germany and Poland and Germany, all these countries have had years and years of war history long before these wars.
Mhm.
Russia and Turkey have been historic enemies for a super long time. Hey, so real quick, if any, I'm a huge board game person. I love board games.
Mhm.
I might go play board games after class tonight at my house. There is a board game. It's from the 50s. It's like on Board Game Geek, which is like the board game site. They rank games, and it's like it's an ultimate game. It's like if you like strategy games because it's a map of Europe. It's called It's called Diplomacy, and you start in 1914, and you play spring and winter and spring and winter, and you play with 7 people, and each one of you is one of the countries. So somebody's Britain, somebody's France, somebody's Germany, somebody's Italy, somebody's Austria, somebody's Turkey, and somebody's Russia. Right? Did I name too many people? Oh yeah, no, that's right. And you write out orders and you make deals with people. It's interesting how you actually play it. It's really fun. It takes a very long time to play though. It takes like hours to play the game, but it's you kind of get like how some of these things would work in Europe. And so Turkey and Russia either team up and they do very well, or they always fight each other usually.
It's called what again? The game?
Diplomacy.
Oh.
Yeah. If anybody is actually seriously interested, I might want to get a game going on one day, but it would be like a 8-hour commitment, like 6 to 8 hours, which
Wow.
you kind of have to be psychotic to do. So that's why like me and few people play that game together. It takes a lot. I haven't played it in a few years because it's hard to get 7 people together for 8 hours of much of anything. All right. Well, so let me turn this down. I'm getting a little feedback. All right. So as the world kind of concludes for peace, Wilson publishes his 14 points for like world peace and how we want that to unfold. And he sends the Secretary of State, William Jennings Bryan, right? The guy that ran into the populist and the Democratic ticket in the 1890s, and he's going to be the lawyer for the Scopes monkey trial in the 20s. He desired an open door to the world, much like what was forced upon China. But Wilson, he saw the war as like, I wrote a righteous conquest of foreign markets, where like the victor goes the spoils. And so he didn't particularly want to, penalize Germany, but gave in to France and other countries wanting to penalize Germany because he thought, well, we can sort all this stuff out in the League of Nations. So he was kind of parsing stuff out left and right in order to get the League of Nations, because he saw that as important for world peace, but also a tool by which he can help establish a new world order in the form of American capitalist colonialism, which essentially is what happens anyways. So his 14 points, you can see I kind of simplified them over here. No secret treaties, which I told you, like he gets super embarrassed by because Lenin publishes all these secret treaties he was making with the Tsar. Free navigation of the seas, free trade between countries, reduction of arms, colonial claims can be adjusted with the colonized. Central powers have to evacuate all the Russian territory, and Belgium and Alsace-Lorraine will go back to France. That was that thing that was stolen back in 1870 in the Franco-Prussian War that kind of formed Germany as a state. And so getting that back is a huge thing. And people here, some of them speak Alsatian, which is its own dialect language, but a lot of them speak French or German or both. And they're not really an allied country because they're constantly ripped back and forth between these two powers, and they've got a lot of industrial wealth there. Some of the other ones you can see here would be like self-determination for the peoples of the Ottoman Empire, right? Like Lebanon and Syria and Iraq, and yeah, that definitely doesn't happen. Creation of independent Poland with access corridor to the sea. This does happen. It's a huge beef with Germany for World War II that's going to come. And then this final one, the League of Nations, is like the forerunner of the UN, the failed forerunner that isn't able to prevent war. And so these things over here, you can read through this on how Wilson was being two-faced and duplicitous about the way he was presenting things and then the way he was going about them. That's why I mentioned Ho Chi Minh. This wasn't really about being post-colonial. And even after World War II, Franklin Roosevelt wants a New Deal for the world, but Winston Churchill wanted British colonialism to increase because to the victor goes the spoils. It's this is the age-old idea of how war works. But, like we see with Germany, when you do that and just take, instead of ending the conflict and trying to figure out how to fix things, it just perpetuates more conflict. Right?
Yeah, for the decolonization, in the 50s, it was passed by Eisenhower, and it was partially in order to make sure the British didn't get their oil. Because remember, the British and French were trying to maintain possession of Egypt, and they asked the U.S. for military aid, but Eisenhower said no, and he later passed a bill at the UN saying that all European countries had to decolonialize. And and you see that's partially to win over third world countries against Soviet aggression, like Soviet communism.
Yeah.
And it was. Yeah, so it was a strategic
and a response to the Suez crisis where they blow up parts of the Suez Canal and Egypt is going to war against Britain basically in France. It's whoa, what? And so America said, hey, Britain and France, sit down or we're going to come over and help Egypt. And it was whoa, that's a stance. That's a weird, so being post-colonial in the way that we were presenting post-colonialism was a way to kind of maintain American market share around the world and decrease the stock of our competitors, like all the other colonial powers. So let go of your traditional colonialism and your colonial possessions, but America now has dollar diplomacy and capital colonialism, right?
And
colonialism by corporation, right? McDonald's is everywhere. Oil companies spread. The multinational corporation that's run by America and guided by American principles around the world.
It's like what I said at the beginning of class, how they made their costs internalized by having a nation rather than having it spread over colonies.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the thing is, the only reason why, well, I don't want to say the only reason, but Churchill sided with, European countries sided with the U.S. because of the threat of Soviet aggression. So you're right, each of the winners had, Stalin wanted communist regimes everywhere. Churchill wanted, let's keep our colonies, and FDR says, no, let's have our spread American capitalism everywhere.
Yeah, let's have a global New Deal, which was not the worst thing in the world. But then it's when we see what happens pretty much immediately after him, which there's a big section coming up at the end of World War II, because in the election of 1944, there's like an oust with the Democratic Party, and it's George Wallace, I think, is the vice president, who is a very progressive thinker. And he gets ousted at the nomination party in 1944, and Harry Truman replaced. Harry Truman didn't even have a college degree. He was a very like uneducated, ignorant person, and he had very little political experience. And so the Oliver Stone documentary that I showed you the accompanying book, the Untold History of the United States. He goes into a long section on that, and like what would have happened if you would have had a progressive thinker that was even more progressive thinking than Roosevelt, versus Harry Truman, who's like conservative and kind of just dangerous, and like he's the one that uses the bomb. It's not to say Roosevelt wouldn't have, but that's a big like left or right decision. And so these kind of approaches to things, it's like we say post-colonialism and do all these things, but then fund Vietnam and the Korean War, and on and
but
on.
wait, I don't, with all due respect, I don't think Truman was conservative. Like, he was internationalist. He funded what's it called, the Marshall Plan. He could have pulled out of Europe. Like, that's what a conservative would have done. Like, let's pull out of Europe.
Yeah.
Like, he actually had a European push. Like, he had Italy's elections.
You're totally right. And in like even in social things, he's more progressive than Franklin Roosevelt was.
Anti-segregation.
He's like on the verge of socialism at one point. But here's the thing: it's like he is not really like FDR was thinking through things and trying to implement things. Truman was more like just kind of reactionary, and so when kind of McCarthy and Nixon get the whole Red Scare going, he flip-flops and turns into like an aggressive, like anti-communism person, even though he previously thought all that was crazy and dangerous. But then at another point, he also then condemns those people. It's like, dude, he's a little bit more of a I just see him as like, oh, dude, he's not Franklin Roosevelt is the thing. So like internationally, he was ready to like, I don't know. He was definitely ready to like amp up the Cold War, nuke people. Like, it's like, these are like, wow, he was just, okay. Enough said. We can talk about Truman when we get to him. If this is the war to end all wars, how do you do that? After Brian goes to Europe to negotiate the Treaty of Versailles and the peace to go with it and the League of Nations, Wilson comes over. So this is 2 months after the war has ended. Europe is like ravaged; it's in shambles. But here you can see him with kind of the leaders, the victors of the war. Some of them. There's lots of pictures of him all over Europe as just a heralded, savior of their society, of their civilization, because they really thought it was absolutely crumbling. We'll come back to Wilson. The war changes America in so many ways, right? This kind of full production machine, even creating things like the Committee on Public Information. They essentially create like psychological advertising, right? Like, not just like a nice picture with something saying what your product is. It's like, oh, how do we actually manipulate people into doing our message or buying our product or whatever? And so then once the war is over, some of those people keep working for the government, but a lot of them, they're like who become like madmen, the early gen of madmen on Madison Avenue in New York, like the advertising executives. So like the kind of propaganda that gets released in World War I shouldn't be understated. Here, with socialism, I had mentioned Eugene V. Debs before. He's kind of probably the most famous socialist in American history, probably until Bernie Sanders at least. And he's pretty radical. He's a very man of convictions, radical guy. And he gets sent to prison for, breaking some of the Sedition Act. And he runs for president for the Socialist Party from prison, and he receives almost 1 million votes in America. Mind you, Russia they're in the midst of a civil war. They're not even a communist country yet. They just have communists and, nationalists basically. So socialism isn't quite the dirty word that it will become, or communism. And like you were saying with World War II, right, the kind of progress that gets made with America wanting to court international countries in their fight against communism, we want to get more of the third world. Well, we can't do that if we're actively promoting colonialism, because they will not be into that. But if we are actively promoting decolonialism, they'll be more open to us. If we're actively promoting racial equality, they will be more open to us, right? If it's European countries, it doesn't matter. But if you're trying to tell free nations that are post-colonial in Africa, hey, you should come be on the side of America, they'd be like, what? Why would we do that? You don't even let black people drink from your water fountains. That's crazy. Why would we do that? It's social pressure for America to change internationally, and it's social pressure, for us to change domestically. And so this kind of idea of a double V for victory begins here. It really gets going in World War II, where it's we're fighting racism abroad and racism at home with the Nazis. But this idea of we're fighting to make the world, a safer place, or a better place, or a place safe for democracy, or not only people that have been Jim Crowed out of the system, but women who are actively trying to get the vote while Wilson's denying it. All of them are going, hello, pot. This is the kettle. You are black. Hypocrite much, man. But they use the jargon and the political rhetoric, against the powerful to institute change and institute some progress.
Yeah, I heard the Soviets ragged on American racism. They always say, hey, look what they do in the South. You don't want to side with them. Those capitalists there. It's just another form of feudalism. Come join the revolution. Yeah,
absolutely. And so it's a source that they easily exploited in America and pointed out our weakness. And it's a source that Russia is still exploiting. If you don't know, most of the most inflammatory things on the internet these days are usually Russian bots. There are millions of them, and they intentionally post, contradictory things right next to each other just to incite, division. Because, Napoleon or Wellington, one of them, divide and conquer, right? That's the easiest path to victory. And right here you can read about our increasing need and reliance on oil. And why, moving into having spheres of influence or mandates over, parts of the Middle East is going to be more and more and more important throughout the 20th century. It never decreases. I'm going to come back to these, and I'm going to talk about gender and pink-collar jobs and that stuff on the as we get into the 20s, because I also want to go back to 1916 or 17, because I have a whole section on kind of changing society with art and gender and a lot of these kind of very traditional roles that folks are used to. So we can look at these all together and as a way, a lens to look into the future. Of course, we get daylight savings time, which is the most worthless gift to America ever. Oh, I have it still. And Max Planck, basically his contributions to like physics and Albert Einstein's and Bohr's, that like what folks are starting to understand about like the detailed, minute part of our world on an atomic level are starting to emerge. So, everything's we're starting to put a lot of stuff together about 30 years before this, but by this time it's like, oh, okay, everybody's already looking forward to like much more detailed notes than what we've been able to come up with at this point. Dealing with death. This is a graph of like the Spanish flu. Look, so this is 1918, and you can see just the deaths rising from this at the beginning.
Looks like
of the
it parallels to what's going on now.
Yeah, right. It's horrible. It's 33 million. I was thinking about this today too. I'm like, I'm sure when we're like back to people being around each other more, cities are going to put laws back into effect about being fined for publicly spitting. Like towns used to, like in the West, like people used to have those were rules, and they seem kind of silly, but now I'm like, oh, maybe people knew that was probably not good for you and would get you sick, and just don't spit around us. We don't have doctors.
Right.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's different, there just like COVID-19, there's not like a locked in certainty about origins of what happened in what order. Even still today for COVID, I don't think there ever will be. I don't think there will be for the Spanish flu, but over the years we've pieced more and more parts of information together to kind of figure out how it spread and like its contagion and its effects across the world. And in the, initially, just like with Krakatoa or something like that, people didn't realize this was like, these were all linked things. And then they did. And then they realized it was everywhere. And some of these are definitely worth watching. You can see pictures of people back in 1918 or 19, like protesting wearing masks because it's their freedom. Like 100 years ago. You think we would be smarter now with the internet, but man, or at least as, misguided as ever. Okay, so here's one of the things that makes Wilson popular. I should write this up more, but with Germany literally starving to death, 2 days after the Armistice, Wilson promises food aid to Germany. And he recruits a private industry mining engineer, like a kind of genius named Herbert Hoover. So, who's a conservative? He becomes a conservative Republican president to oversee the, fall of Wall Street and the beginning of the Great Depression. But he basically gets like an economic agricultural miracle going on in World War I and feeds millions of people. And it's truly a work of like modern civil engineering and orchestrating things. So that's like worth noting because it really does boost Wilson's reputation in Europe across the board. So when we look at all of this, we're talking about millions and millions and millions of humans being mobilized. That's never happened before in history, not even remotely close. $164 million a day being spent. Yeah.
Professor, you have really bad feedback.
Oh, really? How about now? Is it bad? Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
I can hear you.
Is there feedback?
No.
Okay. Good.
I hear you, Professor.
Yeah, you're talking about 10, 11, 12 million soldiers dying. Again, like, that's unthinkable numbers ever before this. And then this is very crazy, too. 8 million civilians dying. Now that's really high. But in World War II, it's going to be much higher. World War II is even more destructive on civilian populations. But what World War II doesn't have that World War I does is the Spanish flu, which comes, on the backside of, at least 20 million people dying from warfare to another like 35 million people dying from this horrible disease that targeted only specific parts of the population, like usually young adults, actually, which is horrible because so many of them had died in the war, in Europe at least. Here you can see, we can see what shell shock looks like. I think I had it start here for a reason. Let's be... this is a longer video than I thought. I wanted to show footage of, you can see, guys, they filmed them because they're literally shell shocked. They can't stand still. They can't hold still. They can't hold a glass of water. The beginning of PTSD and really understanding that and just how, how traumatic industrial war is, even over the kind of barbaric war of antiquity. Like, this is worse. It's so much worse. You didn't have mustard gas in Rome, right? You didn't have tanks and flamethrowers and stuff in, in medieval France. So the Treaty of Versailles. I mean, we've talked about this quite a bit. You guys can read on this. Watch these videos 1 and 2 because I can't really overstate how important the Treaty of Versailles is. It's like one of the most influential moments of the 20th century, fateful moments.
Yeah, and if you understand why this Treaty of Versailles was deficient, you pretty much understand how American foreign policy tried to maintain peace, because they used the Treaty of Versailles as like a negative example, like sort of like an anti-hero in literature. Like, here's exactly what not to do.
Yeah, exactly. It's like here. So here I found the quote by John Maynard Keynes. He says, "The treaty includes no provisions for economic rehabilitation of Europe, nothing to make the defeated Central Empires into good neighbors, nothing to stabilize the new states of Europe, nothing to reclaim Russia." Which right in there is like, oh, okay. Yes, this is a capitalist economist and looking at Russia as a loss for capitalism as a cause. Which after China has their communist revolution, we begin talking about reclaiming China, or like,
Lost China.
Yeah, lost China.
Yeah. There's this literary critic called Rene Girard, and he discerned from his writings of ancient writers like Dostoevsky and Sartre, like you get like many, many great writers. He said that he came up with the metaphysical explanation for religion. And the thing is, he said that the thing about this blew my mind. It really it shot, I don't want to say literally destroyed it, but it blew my mind. He said that people desire things and they learn to desire from other people, and how we desire shelter, we desire food, we desire meeting partners, and how because the world's so complicated and we can easily throw into chaos. Think about if me and you want something, we can fight over it. And the thing is, if you fight over it, what if one community hurts the other? It could cause a war, right? How desire can destroy societies. So he says that religion does 3 things. One, it I forget what the process is called, but he calls it it's like sort of metaphysics, which says here's what you desire, here's ritual, here's sacrifice, and here's what he calls a scapegoat. So for example, there's many religious stories, there's such thing as incest destroying communities, and the people who commit incest are kicked out. how they create like a boogeyman of sorts, or like how like oh, whenever something goes wrong in society, this is the cause of it, like incest or like some sort of moral incompetency. And the thing is, I think that when religion collapses, like it did in the Soviet Union, and you replace it with a communist ideology, then all that desire is just absconded within that framework. So if you have no democracy and no property, it causes like hellish genocide.
And that, I mean, that would be true in the case of like Germany as well, right? Like they
have
like,
stable institutions.
They openly like embraced a clearly godless like conception of humanity. And I've studied Hitler's religion. Like he doesn't have one, but like his metaphysical ideas and stuff, they're
well, like
Nazi
you would say
religion.
you're all religious. Nazis worship race as their god.
They worship race, but them as an extension of God, as in God is nature, and it's kind of, we can get into that with World War II, but it's like that does allow you to like you can totally like disregard other human beings as like not equal to you or in part of the same story or part of the same like makeup, and it's like an ultimate metaphysical application in something like the Nazis or Stalin's purges and the camps and stuff, where we can objectify other humans, and then as like separate from us, we can then do things to them. So it's not like
as the other.
Yeah, as the other, right? So it's the Jew, it's the ancestor, it's the whatever. It's whatever any culture, society at that time says, and like we are on the verge of that. Oh my God, we are. So I won't get preachy about anything, but we are like, even just from a totally objective, like outside looking at it from a sociological or philosophical level, not on a religious, faith, spiritual level, just literally linguistic, sociological terms. American civil religion, which is what like the vast majority of American Christianity is, this mix of nationalism and patriotism and Christian religion and language and dogma, has wildly shifted even in the last 4 years to where it's like, oh, everything got upended and nobody, including the people that are supposedly enjoying the ride, know what's what between things. And so I think that's the easiest way also to like, you know, on a broad scale, you see people do that with like anybody that's poorer than them. It's like, well, that's their fault. That's, you know, they can have a job. It's America. Everybody can pull themselves up by the bootstraps. It's like, that's not true. It's never been true. And even if it was true, like, what a heartless response to something. Like, are we not in the same boat together? And when we don't want to believe that, that's when we can go like, nope, it's us and them. Whatever that us and them might be.
Yeah.
What did you say that guy's name was? The author, the literary critic?
Oh, here, let me type into the chat. It's hard to say. I can
perfect. Yeah.
No, because like when I say it, you're gonna say, "Can you spell that?" So
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and like I think when you look at political ideologies, everyone, Carl Jung, you can see that we often we imbue things with spiritual value when we embrace political ideology. Like a good example is like the environment. Like if you think the world's being destroyed by industrial corporations, then what you're basically doing is you're imbuing environmental systems with spiritual value, and you're making a story that we're destroying the world and nature's going to come and destroy us if we don't take care of it. Now, do you see how there's like a reciprocal amount of sacrifice you make with your ideology?
It's a way of gaining control over reality too.
Yeah, it's a method.
That's good. I like that kind of approach or look at that. I might check that out further. But then what you're saying, about putting a narrative to something for meaning, we do that in history. Now, the way I'm trying to approach it is to be as broad and open with that narrative as possible and let the events try to speak, about themselves. Like let the words and stuff actually be the weight there. But I still have, a narrative to this. There's some kind of flow and logic to it, even if we're not broken up just by themes and it's really just mostly all chronological. Hitler weaponized history even more so than like the Soviets did. I mean, he wove together a masterful tale of, the German people that's mixed with like folk religion from before Christianity and the Germanic, hordes and the barbarians and but that they're pure of this Romanization. And that's really what, Jesus got Romanized, which is dirty and mixed with Jews and Slavic people. And we're in this epic, clash of civilizations, that's why only one can win at.
That's why they like Friedrich Nietzsche, because Nietzsche said he wasn't an anti-Semite, but he said similar things about.
Yeah, and Hitler loved Nietzsche because Nietzsche's sister, who was his survivor, she was a huge Hitler supporter, and rewrote and re-edited his last manuscript on a will to power. And so it sounds very, very social Darwinian. It sounds like Nazi ideology and like blood purity, but it's super edited. It's very concocted. It doesn't, it's really not anything like Nietzsche, but it supports Aryanism and this kind of nature, nature race.
Just stop, but it's hijacked. Like you're right, it is completely hijacked.
Yeah. He hated the Nazis. He was all about freedom and individuality and the expression of art. Freedom, real spirituality is only in dance. He was you can see Nazis saying that. No, I don't think so. They didn't like fun very much. They wanted control.
I like your notion of not notion, how history is a narrative. Like if you look at the Roman Empire versus like the way we talk about American history. If you look at the Roman Empire, all they did was talk about kings and wars. But when we talk about history, we talk about identity groups. We talk about metaphysical changes. We talk about do you see how different civilizations based on their psychic drama, so to speak, political drama. Yeah, they emphasize different viewpoints.
Well, we just have more language too now. Our vocabularies are so much bigger that we can talk about the differences between war and governments and rulers and scientific breakthroughs and religious happenings where they get all kind of mixed in antiquity, right? But that's also because there's a limitation on their language and ability to express all those things and even have categories for things. So when, as we expand and look at more and more things, and it's not like we have to look at everything from every angle. It's like we have to look at lots of things from multiple angles. So if we're looking at, what's happening with these treaties in Versailles, and then we're looking at what's coming down the line, and we're looking at what happened before, but we're also looking at what's going on all around at the moment as well. We're much more likely to walk away with at least a roundly informed idea of what happened, as opposed to a unanarrative that supports one nation or one government or one victor, if you will, the way pretty much all history books are written. And so if we're not trying to, so for instance, with one of the problems with Vietnam and France retaining French Indochina, denying them freedom, even though this treaty says that's what they're about, and then doing the same thing after World War II and fighting a war against them because they didn't want to give communism a foothold anywhere. And they wanted to support French colonialism, Western colonialism throughout the world, over communism for sure. All of their textbooks for history, they all started with like our forefathers, the Gauls, which like, like Gaul is France. It's like France. It's where Caesar conquers and adds to the Roman Empire. And like, what does Gaul have to do with like kids living in the jungles of Southeast Asia? Like, no, not like that's probably not a good place for anybody to start, actually, but certainly not them. And so, but they're trying to put a story to it that like, hey, you're an appendage. You fit into our meta narrative, the French Empire and the Catholic Church, and that being the centerpiece. And we can do that with like kind of anything. Anybody can do that with the pieces and parts of their past if we're really picky and choosy about what we include, or we only want to highlight the good things, or just a few themes or something like that. So
yeah, based on that, you know why I realized, because I like reading how Jung relates to political ideology. You know what I said about the environment? How like most people, if they see something burn down, they don't think much of it. But environmentalists, when they see that, I'm not saying they literally break down, but they view that in relationship to how ecosystems in their mind, how they relate to their lives. So they think, oh my God, this is bad. We're destroying the world. The thing is, that's true, right? But the opposite narrative is there's a reason why we're burning down that tree. We're burning down that tree so we can create food and so we can sustain civilization. And I think that when you look at climate change debates, people who say climate change doesn't exist, some of them really don't believe it, but others of them, they're scared of losing their jobs. And the thing is, because they think that if I lose my job, I won't be able to sustain myself. So you see like how...
Yeah, I don't... Here's the deal, like... Environmental studies, scientists' jobs don't depend on global climate change to exist, right? Like, you need them for, like, geological studies, to do environmental studies in order to build roads to make sure you don't destroy a unique species of animals. Like, there's no shortage of jobs. So I don't buy into that, like, that idea. And I think what you're saying is true because we internalize and project a lot of stuff on history and on, just our concepts of things. But I also think there are very smart scientists who are very big picture people, and they can see things that are they view as inevitable and are like have a breakdown when people ignore the warning signs the same way historians do when they're like, hey, let's not do this again, and nobody listens. It's like, we're really going to elect Nixon again? Like, Nixon got caught with, like, his taxes. He had to pay like $450,000 of back taxes. History's like 100,000% repeating itself again, but nobody seems to realize that. So I feel like I can identify with the craziness that environmental scientists must feel when they see hard data that like is solid, and people don't want to listen to scientific data. But that's not like unique to environmental scientists or historians. That's kind of humans in general. And I think that's what happens with the Treaty of Versailles. This is the phrase is talked about a lot, the seeds of war to come, which is where all these bad things and like making Germany sign a war guilt clause saying that it was their fault, the worst war in all of human history, probably all wars, put together in some ways. It's their fault. They did everything. They're like, that's not going to work out well in the long run. And so this section right here on the stab in the back is, read this. You have to understand kind of the mentality of people and how they felt in losing, and then how somebody like Hitler could take, these feelings and these kind of shared ideas and shared, myths and shared common historical mythology and really weave it together and to control and motivate and manipulate people. And so as there's kind of chaos descending in Germany as the state's falling apart, production stops in America because the war is over. And like yeah, look, 4 million workers engage in just this huge protest, labor protest, and unemployment starts, and there's a real sharp depression in 1919. It bounces back fairly quick, but it signals kind of the end of American farming. Like when we move into the 20s, we're moving into urbanization. We're really moving into the end of like American farm life as we know it, and farming being anything prosperous outside of, you know, large scale industrial Monsanto amalgamations. Yeah, as America is in Europe, there is fear of the Bolshevik Revolution and kind of it spreading. And if you look back on European history, the whole 80 years before this, you can go back to 1848. You go back earlier, but 1848 is the year the Communist Manifesto comes out. And Marx is not the only person to talk about socialism, right? He's not even the only person to talk about communism. He does Marxism, and his work is revolutionary. And with all the problems and all the blowback from industrial revolution and that pressure all across cities and urban centers across Europe, they all have revolutions. And like any time one that pops up, be it a real liberal revolution or like a communist socialist revolution, the other countries of the world that are even enemies with that country will come in to stop the revolution not because Russia cares about France or, you know, Austria loves Italy so much. They don't want a revolution like picking up speed and spilling over into their borders. Like the powerful protect the powerful, not because they like each other, but because they do not want to all fall together. And so that's happening here. Like America and other, you know, colonial powers actually participate in trying to stop the Bolshevik Revolution in Russia and any spread of socialism or communism in America at home. And so this is like the first kind of, propaganda, the Red Scare, communist madness. There's all kinds of great, breakthroughs scientifically. The protons discovered. And then this is interesting. I never knew about this, but the Sox rigged the World Series, the White Sox, and people said that's why they're cursed. It was like a huge scandal. And as we come to an end, it's prohibition. It's a return to normalcy. I'm kind of cleaning this last bit up here, but this is the slogan that the Republicans come in and win on, and it's people are kind of willing to suspend reality or do anything or even give up freedoms or compromise their values, whatever they want, whatever they can do, just to get back to some kind of state of normalcy, because the world has changed too much and people really don't know what to do. Like nobody knows what to do. And in Berlin, madness ensues. They call it Babylon because it's just like this drug-fueled booze party sex orgy for like the whole decade. The musical Cabaret is set in Berlin in the 1920s. Like it is seen like, other nations refer to it as like Sodom, and it's actually what fuels people like Hitler, to get elected on a Law and Order platform, that he would be tough on drugs, which is ironic because he was a massive drug addict. But jargon is one thing, and then policy is another, and most people never even check to see if they go together. So like when we are turning the corner into the 1920s, things have changed a lot, and we are going to start next week, actually a little bit further back before we open the 20s, to look at, well, not that, right here, the changing role of women. Because Margaret Sanger, Planned Parenthood, this is an important thing for American history, whatever you think about it. abortion, poverty, looking at abortion rates. This is World War One, and it's during like the women's movement. Like she's part of it. It's in the mix. And don't get me wrong, we'll talk about all of Margaret Sanger. We'll look at eugenics. Like we don't clean people up for history, any of them, right, left, middle. It doesn't matter. Let's just talk. There's no point in trying to hide stuff. It's not going to help us figure things out. So there's all kinds of firsts for women politically. Jeanette Rankin gets elected. She's the first U.S. Senator or first U.S. House of Representatives, a female House representative. And, you know, this is where cubism, you know, we went over kind of broad strokes of these art movements, but I figured it would be very helpful to have them in place as we keep moving forward so you can really see where they lay at. And so I connect that and kind of the way we talk about the past and oversimplifying things and even this kind of pro-life, pro-choice, false divide that's in there is...
you know it's 9 o'clock, right?
Yep.
Oh yeah, I was also tell you that next
Well,
week.
hold on just one sec, because I'm just saying that this section is where we're going to start at next week, looking at the changing role of women, and then into the 20s, because that's, you know, when not only prohibition becomes law, but women have the right to vote and sexuality begins changing rapidly for people. So it's another one of those rugs out from under their feet. Okay, go ahead, Stephanie.